Men, women don't just randomly behave badly. Often, they're testing to see what you'll accept. Before pushing boundaries seriously, many women deploy subtle psychological tests, measuring your tolerance for disrespect, your enforcement of boundaries, and how much they can get away with before you push back. These aren't conscious experiments most of the time. They're learned behaviors, testing whether you're a strong man who maintains standards or pushable man who accepts whatever treatment comes. Today, we're exposing 6 psychological tests women use to measure your tolerance levels. And once you recognize these tests, you'll never fail them again. Before we dive in, hit subscribe, smash that like button, and hit the hype by dropping a comment if you've ever felt tested in a relationship and wondered what was really happening. Your recognition might help another man maintain his standards. Test 1. Manufactured jealousy. Testing your security and boundaries. She mentions other men showing interest, maintains visible contact with exes, shares that someone asked her out, or creates situations designed to make you jealous. She's testing whether you'll become insecure and chase harder, become possessive and controlling, or whether you'll maintain confidence while setting clear boundaries about appropriate behavior. Your response reveals your security level and whether you'll enforce relationship boundaries. The test works because jealousy reveals insecurity, and insecurity reveals weakness that can be exploited. She's assessing whether mentioning other men makes you desperate to secure her attention, which gives her power, or whether you remain confident in your value while establishing standards for appropriate behavior, which maintains your power. Notice how she introduces other men into conversation. Is it organic and innocent, or does it seem calculated to gauge your reaction? Does she mention ex-partners frequently? Does she share details about male attention she receives? Does she maintain visible friendships with men who are clearly interested in more? The frequency and nature of these introductions reveal whether it's testing or genuine. Pay attention to her response when you do react. If you show jealousy or insecurity, does she seem pleased by your discomfort? Does she enjoy having triggered emotional response? That pleasure reveals the jealousy was manufactured to test you, and that your insecure reaction failed the test. If you remain unbothered and simply state your boundaries, does she respect them or push back? Her response reveals whether the test was about finding your standards or about creating drama. Watch whether the jealousy-inducing behavior stops after you address it calmly and firmly. If you establish clear boundaries, I'm not interested in relationships where partners maintain inappropriate friendships with exes, or telling me about other men pursuing you isn't behavior I find acceptable. And she adjusts her behavior, you've passed the test. If she escalates or becomes defensive, she's testing whether you'll enforce stated boundaries. Listen to her justifications for the behavior. Does she claim she's just being honest? That you're being insecure or controlling? That it shouldn't bother you if you trust her? These justifications are secondary tests. She's checking if she can manipulate you into accepting behavior by making you feel that objecting is the problem rather than her behavior being the problem. Notice whether she creates competition scenarios. Does she talk about other men in ways designed to make you feel you're competing for her attention? Does she compare you to others? The competitive framework is designed to make you work harder to win her approval, which establishes her power if you accept the game. Check your own emotional response. Are you becoming anxious, possessive, or desperate to prove yourself? If so, you're failing the test by allowing her manufactured jealousy to control your emotional state. Are you remaining confident while establishing clear expectations? If so, you're passing by maintaining frame and boundaries. Watch whether she uses jealousy as recurring tool or whether it was genuine one-time test. If jealousy-inducing behavior keeps happening despite your boundaries, she's learned that you won't actually enforce consequences, which means you've failed the test by having boundaries without enforcement. Real boundaries include consequences for violations. The correct response is maintaining confident frame while setting clear standards. Acknowledge concerning behavior without becoming emotionally reactive or jealous. State your boundaries clearly. Certain behaviors aren't acceptable in your relationships. Then enforce them through action if necessary. Don't compete with other men or work harder to secure her attention. That proves the test worked, and you're controllable through jealousy. Instead, demonstrate that you're confident in your value and willing to walk away from situations that don't meet your standards. The psychological mechanism being tested is whether you operate from abundance or scarcity mindset. Scarcity mindset leads to jealous, possessive, desperate behavior when faced with potential competition. Abundance mindset leads to confident boundary setting and willingness to walk away if standards aren't met. She's assessing which mindset you operate from because it determines the entire power dynamic going forward. The long-term impact of failing this test is establishing dynamic where she controls your emotions through jealousy and you constantly work to prove yourself worthy of her exclusive attention. Passing establishes that you're a secure man with standards who won't tolerate inappropriate behavior, which actually increases her respect and attraction because you've demonstrated you're not desperate or controllable. Test 2. Public disrespect. Testing your self-respect and response to social violation. She publicly mocks or contradicts you, tells embarrassing stories, or makes dismissive jokes to test whether you'll tolerate disrespect to avoid conflict. Public settings add pressure not to make a scene, so your reaction reveals whether you value her comfort over your dignity. If it's rare and accidental, that's rudeness. If it's frequent and deliberate, it's testing. When confronted, does she apologize or accuse you of being too sensitive? True respect means behavior change, not excuses. If she laughs when others do, enjoys your embarrassment, or escalates over time, she's asserting dominance. The right response: address it calmly but firmly. That's not acceptable. Then discuss privately. Make clear it won't happen again. And leave if it does. Failing this test shows you'll accept public disrespect. Passing it proves you maintain standards, even under social pressure. Test 3. Emotional withdrawal after boundary setting. Testing your boundary maintenance. When you establish a boundary, say no to something she wants, or assert your preferences, she responds with emotional withdrawal, becoming cold, distant, silent treatment, or sexually unavailable. She's testing whether you'll cave and abandon reasonable boundaries to restore her warmth and affection, or whether you'll maintain boundaries despite emotional pressure. Your response reveals whether she can control your behavior through emotional manipulation. The test works because emotional withdrawal creates anxiety and discomfort that you naturally want to resolve. By making her warmth and affection contingent on you abandoning boundaries, she's checking whether emotional pressure will override your standards. If it does, she's learned she can manipulate your behavior through strategic coldness. Notice the timing and pattern of withdrawal. Does it happen specifically after you've said no, set boundaries, or prioritized your needs over hers? Does she become warm again once you've apologized, changed your position, or given her what she initially wanted? This correlation proves the withdrawal is tool for controlling your behavior rather than genuine need for emotional space. Pay attention to whether the withdrawal is communicated or purely punitive. Does she say, "I need some space to process this," or does she simply become cold without explanation? Communication suggests genuine emotional processing. Unexplained coldness suggests punishment designed to make you uncomfortable enough to comply. Watch whether the withdrawal ends when you hold firm, or whether it escalates into more aggressive punishment. If she returns to normal when you maintain boundaries calmly and respectfully, the withdrawal was test that you passed. If she intensifies withdrawal, adds guilt tripping, or threatens the relationship, she's committed to breaking your boundaries through escalating emotional pressure. Listen to how she frames the withdrawal when you address it. Does she acknowledge using withdrawal to manipulate you into compliance? Or does she claim she genuinely needed space, was hurt by your boundary, or frame you as the problem for being unwilling to accommodate her needs? The framing reveals whether she recognizes the manipulation or is committed to denying it. Notice whether she accepts your boundaries eventually or continues punishing you indefinitely for having them. Healthy partners might be disappointed by boundaries, but ultimately respect them. Manipulative partners use withdrawal to punish boundaries until you abandon them to restore peace. Check whether withdrawal is her consistent response to not getting her way. If every time you assert yourself she becomes cold and distant, withdrawal is her primary control tactic, and she's very invested in its effectiveness for shaping your behavior. Watch how this affects your decision-making over time. Do you find yourself avoiding asserting boundaries, saying no, or expressing preferences because you anticipate her withdrawal? If you're preemptively complying to avoid her emotional punishment, the withdrawal has successfully trained you, and you've failed the test by allowing her to control your behavior. The correct response is maintaining boundaries regardless of her emotional state. When she withdraws in response to reasonable boundary, don't chase her, don't apologize for having boundaries, and don't abandon your position to restore warmth. Continue being respectful but firm. Say something like, "I understand you're disappointed, and I respect your feelings, but the boundary I've set is reasonable, and I'm maintaining it. When you're ready to discuss this respectfully, I'm here." Then give her space without changing your position. If she can't handle reasonable boundaries without emotional manipulation, that's valuable information about whether she's capable of healthy relationship. The psychological mechanism being tested is whether your need for her affection and approval overrides your commitment to reasonable boundaries. She's checking if emotional withdrawal is an effective tool for controlling you. If you maintain boundaries despite her coldness, you've passed by demonstrating that her emotional manipulation doesn't work on you. If you cave, you've taught her that withdrawal successfully controls your behavior. The long-term impact of failing this test is relationship, where you can't assert yourself without facing emotional punishment. You learn to suppress needs, avoid boundaries, and prioritize her emotional comfort over your own standards. She learns that withdrawal is an effective tool for getting her way, so she uses it increasingly. Passing establishes that you're a man who maintains healthy boundaries even under emotional pressure, which forces her to engage with your boundaries through communication rather than through manipulation. Test 4. Comparing you to other men. Testing your response to status competition. She compares you to other men, exes, friends' boyfriends, or vague better guys, to see if you'll feel inadequate and overcompensate, or if you'll reject the manipulation. The goal is to trigger insecurity and make you compete for her approval. Notice timing. Does she compare when she wants something? More money, attention, effort. That exposes the agenda. If comparisons are always negative, it's not feedback, it's control. If you meet one standard and she immediately sets another, it's not improvement she wants, it's power. And if she'd explode if you compared her to other women, it's proof the game is one-sided. The right response: refuse the frame entirely. Say calmly, "I'm not competing with other men. If you're unhappy, speak directly. If you think others are better, you're free to be with them." Never try to prove yourself, that's the trap. Failing this test locks you into endless inadequacy. Passing shows you're secure, self-defined, and immune to manipulation through comparison. Test 5. Creating drama. Then blaming you, testing accountability assignment. She creates conflict, emotional chaos, or problematic situations, then frames you as the cause, or suggests you're overreacting to her reasonable behavior. She's testing whether you'll accept blame for problems you didn't create, or whether you'll hold her accountable for her actual behavior. The test works because accepting blame is often easier than prolonged conflict about who's actually responsible. If you'll accept responsibility for her behavior to end conflict, she's learned she can avoid accountability indefinitely while you carry blame for both people. Notice patterns where drama consistently follows her behavior, but you end up apologizing. Did she do something problematic? You reacted reasonably, and somehow you're the one who needs to fix things. This reversal proves successful manipulation where she's escaped accountability. Pay attention to how conflict narratives are constructed. When explaining what happened, does she omit her role entirely? Does she start the story from your reaction rather than her action that prompted it? Selective chronology is a tool for escaping accountability by making your response the real problem. Watch whether she ever takes accountability or whether all problems trace back to you. Does she say "I was wrong" without immediately adding "but you"? If she never accepts responsibility without deflecting, she's systematically avoiding accountability while positioning you as source of all relationship problems. Listen to her framing when she describes conflicts to others. Does she tell them about her behavior that caused the conflict, or only about your reaction? If others only hear about your response without context of what prompted it, she's managing social narrative to avoid accountability while damaging your reputation. Notice whether she acknowledges cause and effect, or pretends your reactions are unprovoked. If she did something hurtful and you expressed hurt, does she recognize that connection? Or does she claim you're just randomly upset and she did nothing to cause it? Denying obvious causation is gaslighting designed to make you question whether your reactions are reasonable. Check whether she uses your reactions against you. Does she claim your hurt or anger is the real problem rather than addressing the behavior that caused those reactions? Flipping focus from her action to your reaction is manipulation tactic that makes you the problem. Watch whether conflicts ever resolve with her accountability, or whether resolution always requires you apologizing for being upset about her behavior. If conflict ends only when you've accepted blame for reacting to her problematic behavior, she's successfully established that she's never accountable. The correct response is refusing to accept false blame and maintaining clarity about actual cause and effect. Calmly identify what actually happened. You did X, I responded with Y, because X was hurtful, disrespectful, problematic. I'm not apologizing for having a reasonable reaction to your behavior. Don't let her rewrite history or flip responsibility. If she can't take accountability for her own actions, that's fundamental character issue that should prompt serious reconsideration of the relationship. The psychological mechanism being tested is whether you can be made to accept responsibility for her behavior through confusion, guilt, or conflict exhaustion. She's checking if she can avoid accountability by making you believe you're the problem whenever conflicts arise. The long-term impact of failing is accepting responsibility for all relationship problems, while she faces no accountability for her behavior. You apologize constantly while she never does. You work to fix problems you didn't create, while she continues problematic behavior without consequence. This dynamic destroys self-trust because you start believing you're actually the problem, despite evidence suggesting her behavior is the real issue. Test 6. Last-minute changes and chronic flackiness. Testing time respect. This trick tests how much you value your own time. She often cancels plans, arrives late, or changes arrangements last minute. To see if you'll tolerate it or set boundaries. If you accept repeated flakiness without consequence, she learns your time has no real value. Notice the pattern. Is she unreliable only with you, but punctual with others? That shows it's not chaos, it's choice. Weak excuses and repeated sorry without change reveal manipulation, not genuine regret. If she never compensates for wasted time or expects you to simply accept it, that's entitlement. When you start lowering expectations or stop planning seriously because she might cancel, you've already adapted to disrespect. Reliable people give notice, adjust plans considerately, and change behavior after feedback. Chronic flakiness. Despite your honesty, means she's decided your time isn't worth respecting, and you've confirmed it by staying available. The solution: enforce standards. If she cancels, make other plans. If she's late, don't wait endlessly. Reduce access and priority. Respect for your time starts with you. Failing this test leads to one outcome: your time becomes optional, your plans conditional, and your presence taken for granted.